Hello everybody, Robert Marzullo here, and I want to show you today how to draw the human nose. And what this is going to be is I'm going to start a series of different videos that will have just specific body parts in mind. We'll probably go through the entire face and then, different parts, the body structure, I may even do some on, just different things altogether, like cars, buildings, whatever. But I feel if I do them specifically, it'll give people, young artists, a chance to absorb it better and ask questions specifically to certain areas. So I'm going to start with the real basic form, uh, like I generally do when I do this stuff, of blocking it out. But then I'm also just going to go into just kind of drawing from the mind and the shapes that I'm familiar with the nose. So this is a front on shot. I'm starting very angular with this. I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see. And there's the front ball of the nose, the bridge where it comes up and meets to the brows. And a couple of these shots I'll probably draw a little bit further into it, to where it connects to parts of the face. But you see that by doing this in an angular form like this, it's kind of easy to feel it out, and then you would take it to another layer or another your next stage, and start rounding out the forms of it and picking up what lines you want and leaving what lines, or I'm sorry, uh, picking up the lines that you want and doing away with the lines that you don't need. So and the it's famous for the nose is always a pretty hard shadow underneath or to the side. And another shadow to keep in mind is the way that it rolls off. Obviously, there's not a very distinct line like you see here. It rolls off into the face, kind of like so, on both sides where it connects. And that's where you would actually kind of like erase this line and more or less create this shape of this line with shading. And you can always keep that in mind when you're drawing something. And if it looks too rigid or too stiff, try erasing your lines and instead doing it with smaller cross hatching or shading. And that might be the problem, that it's just looking too comic book or cartoony because there's stiff lines all over the design. Um, we don't really actually have lines on our face, obviously, so sometimes you have to think in terms more of shading. Uh, Obviously, all you really see when you're looking at a face is transition of color and light and dark. So that's what you're trying to emulate when you're drawing. So sometimes those big, thick, heavy lines get in the way. So there's our first one. I'm going to keep these relatively basic and stylized. Tends to be the way I draw, anyways. And like I said, if I wanted to refine this, I would add another layer and I would smooth out these lines and get away from this rigid structure. But for this purpose, I want to just show you the basic construction of it, and then hopefully you can fine tune it from there. So there's one. And now we'll do a profile. And the profile, say we're doing like a little upturned nose. Again, you can kind of box out the shape if you want. And we'll just do that where it meets the brow. The brow would go back and around like that. And I always kind of draw in some shading lines to give myself a visual guide of, okay, this, we got the little upturn here. I'm going to erase some of these construction lines on this one to get a little bit more refined drawing of it while I go. The opening of the nostrils, you may see just a little bit from the side. The roundedness to the back of the nostril there. And the connection it makes to the upper lip. And I won't get into drawing the lip too much because that'll be a whole other set of videos there, or video. And then you get kind of this rounded shadow that goes with the form here of the nostril. Kind of does one of those numbers. And then depending on the ball of the nose, the shadowing there, and the connection to the nostril. And then obviously the shadow below the nose onto the upper lip. And then from the side here, you got to nice and easy get this to blend into the cheek. And then into the little upper part of the mass of the above the mouth there. I don't know if you want to call that a laugh line or not, but a little bit of shading underneath the nose here that would connect to that other shading. And like I've said in other videos, if you want more of a refined look, you know, the less lines or the thinner the lines that you can create for your shading, the more it's going to look smooth and you know, especially if you're trying to do something that maybe looks beautiful or feminine, then you'll want to use less lines, thinner lines. You know, even techniques like this where, you know, say you come to this part of the nose and erase this line and then come back and make it thin down to a very thin amount, maybe just a couple little dots. You got to get it nice and straight to make it look right. But what it looks like there is that light is hitting off that surface, and you're kind of losing the line a little bit because that's where your light source is. So little things like that kind of make it look a little more refined or finessed. Okay, so there's our side view of a particular nose. Let's try another one. And feel free to let me know in the comments too what you like to see with this stuff. I want to make sure that when I'm bringing these videos to you that they're things that you're looking for, things that are relevant to what you're trying to learn in art. You know, and the reason why I thought to do this, you know, obviously I know a lot of people struggle with noses, and there's a lot of variations in any facial feature, but the nose seems to be one of the more elusive ones to draw, like, you know, almost like hands are or something like that. But my hands are definitely probably the toughest for anybody. But if you leave me the information and let me know what you're looking for, then I can, you know, I can bring you what what you need. Try to make these videos more informative and better suited to what you're looking for. Alright, now I want to try like an upshot of the nose. That can be tricky. But I don't want to just do a straight up shot, which is kind of like what this would be, you know, like and I could have the nostrils wrong here. I'm not looking at reference, which I probably should be for this one. But I know that from memory that what the nose kind of does, you know, on this upshot, all the little flap of skin comes back like this, and that actually connects to the lip, which it all does obviously, but it's kind of the more defined line that connects to the lip. The nostrils come back like this, the ball of the nose kind of points out like that, rounds back here, connects to the face here. But more or less what makes this look believable or you know, correct or whatever is the way that you're going to be able to draw the bridge in the brow, you know, the eyes, from this angle are going to look very thin and slanted, you know. And again, I'm not going to get so much into highs in the relationship of the nose to the face too much, but I think in this perspective it almost has to be there so that you really get what you're looking up at. You know that this is a nose. Um, so you know, like the relationship from that to the brow and the way the cheeks would appear almost flat, but you'd have kind of a small little rounded ridge there. And that's where it all gets tricky. The trickiest part of this perspective, I would think, is making the cheekbones connect to the mouth shape, and the mouth is gonna, you're almost gonna not see any top lip at all. The bottom lip's gonna pretty much take over. You know, something like that. And then now you start to realize that you're kind of looking up at the nose shape. And you know, the thing is about a perspective like this again, this alone could be its own video. And now I'm starting to realize that nose is pretty big. But the thing is, like, you know, shading underneath here, get that just right. You don't want to quite shade the entire underneath of it. And I don't know that you want a perfectly traced line to the edge like I just did. The shadow would probably start to meet more at the nostrils here. One thing to remember about shadowing, if it looks too straight, then it's probably wrong. You know, if you look around you, shadows are very often not perfectly straight to the object. The light source is very rarely just perfectly off to one side, and then there's also the fact that there's hardly ever just one light source. So just, you know, seeing things like that and taking note of it is always going to make your drawings come out better and better as you progress through art. And I'm not going to take that sketch too far, but hopefully that'll show you, you know, what I was trying to convey there with a bit of an upshot. Even though I don't think my proportions are very, very good on that one. But these are more or less, like I said, specific to the nose. The upshot itself could be an all-day study, you know, or you're going to always study upshots. To me, they're one of the tougher things to draw. So I spend, you know, countless attempts at, you know, and God knows how many wasted sheets of paper trying to draw my upshots before I'm happy with them. Okay, so let's see, what's another, we can do an angle shot. And, you know, again, if you're trying to get a certain angle that may be tough, try fleshing it out, or boxing it out, shaping it out. It's always going to be easier to draw, you know, boxed out shapes. Okay, so there's kind of a boxy version of a nose from a downward angle. You know, and you can take that as far as you want. You can do that with the brow, you can do that with the ocular cavities, all of that, you know, whatever helps you visualize that angle. Okay, so again, I keep veering off. Let me stay on the nose here. Um, so now, with that one, just I guess I'll show you this one in a layer effect so that you can see how that boxing it out and then taking it to the next level layer helps out. So let me take that first layer, convert it to a blue line, which I like to do for my drawings. Go back to the my new sketch layer, and then now with my underlying structure, I can draw over top with a little more confidence, and maybe even add some stylized. You know, maybe he's got the busted part up by the top of the nose. So I faded the line off a little bit there, and darker down here. just to give it some line weight and some definition. Obviously the one side of the nose will appear to be a little bit shorter. Whatever side's closer to the viewer will appear to have a little bit more definition and size. And then here I want to be real careful because I want to define that bridge that I drew, that bump on the bridge, but then also I want it to be shaded properly. So maybe I'll just, before I go drawing a heavy line there, I'll just kind of do a little bit of shading, kind of feel it out that way. Same thing with the ball of the nose. The shading will be wider where there's more depth in between the two masses, and then break that off. And there's going to be a little shadow underneath the nose here that we'll still get a glimpse of from this angle. And then obviously the shadow from the entire nose to the bottom of the, below it. Push that cheekbone back further. And the way that it rounds out to the face, and then I believe you'd get a little bit of a shadow right here, not much, not overdone anyways. Okay, and then let's pan back a little bit, take out the blue line for a second. Yeah, not bad, not horrible, not great, but but you see how the difference from, let's see if I just move the blue line over to the side for a second, or the sketch over to the side. You'll see that how the underlying structure was able to get me from here to there pretty quick and pretty efficiently on an angle that I probably otherwise would have struggled with if I just drew it out. So that's the main purpose of that technique, to do that. And let me think here. Yes, one other one that might be good to do is the stylized. I guess these are a bit stylized as they are, but over stylized, like a very comic book or anime style. You're just going to take the same thing, say with that upturned nose that we did from a different, the different side, other side. You're going to just upturn it more, and then everything's just going to be a little bit more cartooned or overdone. And the line work would be more simplistic because you don't need to convey much, especially with something that may be going to an inker or a colorist from that point. So you can basically take the same designs that we've done here, kind of animate them just a little bit. Simplify the line work, and you start to come up with a pretty quick cartoon version of the same stuff. Even though those were already kind of stylized, that's typically the way I draw. So I don't spend a whole lot of time doing realism, even though I should. There's another one. So hopefully that helps you out. That's just a brief perspective into the nose. there's any questions that you have and a way that I can explain it better, obviously you just take the same information and then vary it, add your own way of doing it, your own style. Um, so you essentially just have the nasal openings to worry about, the ball of the nose and the way that it connects to the back of the nose, the nostrils, and then the bridge and the way that the bridge connects to the brow. So, and then the way it connects to the face here. But that's essentially the structure of the nose, and there's just tons and tons of variations for each, and but if you break it down like that, you should be able to better construct your nose drawings and make them look believable on the faces of the characters that you're trying to do. So hopefully that helps you, and if you got any questions or anything else you'd like to see me draw, just leave me a message and I'll work on that. Be sure to follow my progress on the Blackstone comic by Ram Studios. You can find that on ramstudios1.deviantart. And thanks for watching, thanks for viewing, and keep drawing. Take care. Bye bye.